The hospital lights were harsh, white, and unforgiving. My life depended on a surgery I couldn't delay, and yet, the people who were supposed to care the most had turned me away. My name is Ethan Miller. I was 29 at the time, lying on a narrow hospital bed, waiting for a miracle my parents refused to fund. The cost was $5,000. For most families, a minor inconvenience. For mine, a reason to deny me. I had grown up feeling invisible, like a shadow in my own home. My parents were always there physically, but their support was conditional, transactional, and cold. Achievements were never celebrated, mistakes were magnified. Love, I learned early, was something I had to earn or endure quietly. Now, facing a critical surgery, that lack of support hit me harder than ever. "Ethan," the nurse said softly, "your parents haven't responded yet. They still haven't signed the consent forms." I closed my eyes, trying not to think about it. But the truth burned hotter than the hospital lights. My own parents, people who carried my name, shared my blood, had refused to give me $5,000 to save my life. I remembered my childhood vividly. Every time I asked for something reasonable, I was told I was lucky, I was ungrateful, or that I should manage like everyone else. My parents didn't see me as a person. They saw me as an obligation. That day, as my condition worsened, my heart sank. I knew my parents had enough money. I had seen them flaunt it countless times. Vacations, dinners, gifts for extended family. But for me, their own son, they drew the line. "Maybe they think I'm exaggerating," I muttered to myself. "Maybe they think I don't really need this." Hours passed. My hands shook, my body weak. The surgical team hovered, reminding me the procedure couldn't wait much longer. Then, a soft knock. My brother stepped in. He was younger than me by 3 years, broke, struggling, never had a proper job, never had a college degree. Most people would have counted him out, but the moment he saw me lying there, something inside him snapped. "Ethan," he said quietly, "give me your hand." I looked at him. He wasn't wearing a suit. No flashy watch, no fancy car, just a hoodie and worn sneakers. And yet, he had the determination in his eyes that my parents never had. "What are you doing here?" I whispered weakly. He smiled softly. "I'm paying for this. Don't fight it." I laughed bitterly. "You? Broke as you are?" He shrugged. "I'm broke, but I don't need money to know what's right. I'm not waiting for someone else to decide if you live or die." He pulled out an envelope, thick with cash. Every bill carefully counted, every dollar painstakingly saved. It wasn't much. $5,000 wasn't wealth, but it was enough. Enough to secure the surgery that my parents refused. I stared at him, my voice caught in my throat. How did you even—" I borrowed. I hustled. I begged. I stole a few hours here and there. Doesn't matter. What matters is that you're alive. The nurse handed him the consent form. He signed it with steady hands. Calm. Determined. Like he was delivering justice where my parents failed. My parents? They never appeared. Their absence echoed louder than any words. That night, as I lay prepped for surgery, I realized something. Life doesn't always come from those who share your blood. Sometimes, it comes from those who share your heart. My brother had risked everything, his savings, his pride, his time to save me. He had refused to let my parents' selfishness define my fate, and for the first time, I understood what real family meant. Not wealth, not titles, not blood, support, sacrifice, loyalty. As I drifted into the anesthesia haze, I whispered a silent promise to myself. I will not forget. I will not forgive easily. I will honor this gift, and when the time comes, I will make sure the people who tried to abandon me feel the weight of their choices, because survival is the first step. Revenge comes next. I woke up hours later, my body heavy, my mind foggy from the anesthesia. The bright hospital lights hurt my eyes, but the first thing I noticed was the envelope of cash still resting on the chair beside me. My brother was asleep in the waiting room chair, arms crossed over his chest, head tilted back. Exhaustion painted every line on his face. I wanted to speak, to thank him, but my throat was raw, my voice weak. When I finally croaked, "Hey," he stirred, blinking, then smiled. "You're awake," he said simply. No grand speeches, no heroic gestures, just presence. I tried to sit up. Pain shot through my ribs, but I didn't care. You really did all this?" He nodded. "You needed this surgery, and your parents weren't going to give it to you. I couldn't just watch." I felt a mix of gratitude, disbelief, and anger. Anger at my parents, anger at the way they had let this happen, but mostly gratitude. My brother, poor and struggling, had done what they never would. I remembered every moment from my childhood, the cold silences, the unfair comparisons, the subtle punishments whenever I tried to assert myself. Every birthday they ignored, every accomplishment minimized, and now, this. They had the money, they had the means, and yet, when it mattered most, they refused. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had raised me with lessons of obedience, of humility, of being grateful, and yet, they had never taught me the most important lesson, what it truly means to care. I turned to my brother. "You didn't have to do this. You're barely making it yourself." He shook his head. "I'm alive. You're alive. That's all that matters. Everything else is secondary." The nurse came in, checking my vitals and reminding me of the recovery plan. As she left, I caught a glimpse of the hospital window. The city lights twinkled in the distance. Life outside had continued without pause. The world didn't care about my parents' neglect or my surgery, but my brother did, and that made all the difference. During the next few days, as I slowly regained my strength, I began to reflect on my life. My parents' neglect had shaped me in ways I hadn't fully realized. I had grown independent, cautious, and observant. I had learned to survive, to anticipate cruelty before it arrived, but I had also learned to feel alone, to trust few, and to measure love in small increments. Now, that foundation of independence collided with the reality of being saved by my brother. He had acted out of instinct, out of loyalty, out of love, not obligation, not duty. It made me realize something crucial. Family isn't always the people who share your blood. Sometimes, family is the person who shows up when it counts. And as my body healed, so did a part of me that I hadn't realized was broken. The anger at my parents simmered in the background, a cold reminder that the people who were supposed to protect me had failed, but it was tempered by the warmth of knowing that I wasn't alone. Not entirely. Not anymore. When the doctor finally cleared me for discharge, my brother helped me into the car, his hands steady, his expression calm. "They'll call, you know," he said. "I know," I replied. "And I'm ready." Ready for what? I didn't say. But deep down, I knew. The neglect, the humiliation, the cold indifference, they wouldn't go unchallenged. Not now. Not ever. The ride home was quiet, filled with an unspoken understanding. We didn't need to talk about money, about sacrifices, or about the past. The act itself said everything. It was a statement, a declaration that loyalty and love could triumph over greed and neglect. When we arrived at my apartment, I unpacked the envelope. The $5,000 wasn't a fortune, but the gesture? Priceless. It symbolized trust, courage, and a bond that no amount of blood tests, money, or parental authority could sever. That night, as I lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling, thinking about the family I had and the family I was building. My parents might have failed me, but my brother had succeeded where they could not, and that success planted a seed in me, a slow, burning realization that one day I would reclaim control over my life, my story, and my legacy. The surgery had saved my body. Yes, but it was my brother who had saved my spirit, and that spirit was never going to be crushed again. Weeks had passed since the surgery. My body was healing, but my mind was sharper than ever. Each day, I replayed every word my parents had ever said to me. Every subtle jab, every cold glance, every time they reminded me I was lucky to even exist. and I realized something terrifying for them. I was done being weak. They didn't call to check on me. They didn't send a single message to see how I was recovering. Instead, they flaunted their wealth elsewhere, posting pictures of lavish dinners and charity events, pretending nothing had happened, pretending I didn't exist. I sat at my desk one night, the envelope of cash still unopened in a drawer, not because I didn't need it, but because it reminded me of who really cared. My brother. My real family, not the ones with fancy houses and smiling Instagram feeds. I started planning quietly, not for revenge yet, not in the loud, obvious way. Just a careful, calculated strategy to reclaim the life they tried to control. First, I began documenting everything. Medical bills, their refusal to fund my surgery, the emotional abuse I had endured for decades. Everything. Every phone call, every text, every insult recorded, stored, cataloged. Then I contacted a lawyer. Not for confrontation, not for threats, just preparation. Because when you've been underestimated your entire life, preparation is power. Meanwhile, I spent time with my brother. He didn't need recognition. He didn't want fame, but he understood what had been done to me. Together, we rebuilt a network of quiet allies, friends, distant relatives, anyone who had witnessed my parents' hypocrisy over the years. Every step I took was invisible to them. They continued their charade, thinking I was too weak, too hurt, too submissive to fight back. And then, the first subtle move hit. An anonymous tip to the board of one of my father's business ventures. A leak of documents showing mismanagement, poor decisions, and favoritism toward people outside the company, while neglecting critical operations. Nothing illegal, but enough to make the board start asking questions. I watched from the sidelines as they scrambled. My father called urgent meetings. My mother tried to smooth over reputations. But every move they made, I anticipated. Every excuse they created, I already had proof to counter. The real turning point came at a family gathering my parents hosted, hoping to celebrate my recovery. Invitations had been sent to close friends, distant relatives, neighbors, all of them witnesses to the facade my parents had carefully curated for decades. I walked in with my brother at my side, clean-shaven, composed, fully in control. My parents didn't recognize the same Ethan Miller they had ignored, belittled, and refused to help. They smiled politely. "How are you feeling?" my mother asked. Voice tight. "Recovered," I said. "Thanks to those who actually cared." My eyes flicked to my brother, who nodded subtly. A hush fell over the room. Guests exchanged glances. My parents' smiles faltered. "You look different," my father said, tension creeping into his tone. "I am different," I replied calmly. 30 years of being underestimated tends to change you. The subtle truth was now obvious. The child they tried to erase had grown into a man who couldn't be controlled. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. I didn't cry. I simply let the room feel the weight of my presence. Every whispered comment, every uneasy glance at my brother, every faltering smile from my parents spoke louder than words could. By the end of the evening, the guests had quietly shifted allegiance. They saw the care my brother had shown, the confidence I radiated, and the vulnerability my parents had always ignored. When the door closed behind the last guest, my father's face was pale, my mother's jaw tense. "You think this is over?" my father muttered. I shook my head. "This is just the beginning. But don't worry. I'm not loud. I don't need to be. You'll see the consequences quietly, every day, in ways you never expect." And with that, I left the room. The weight of decades lifted from my shoulders. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to beg for attention. I simply existed. And in that existence, the truth had teeth. By the time the weekend came, the ripple effects of that family gathering were impossible to ignore. Word had spread among the guests. The son they had ignored, the child they had belittled, was no longer invisible. Ethan Miller had transformed from the overlooked boy into a man who carried presence like armor. My brother had been at my side the entire time, silent, loyal, unwavering. The first sign of real fallout came unexpectedly. My father received a call from his company's board. Mismanagement, leaks subtle, undeniable, had prompted an emergency meeting. My mother's charity connections began to strain. Sponsors were hesitant, invitations dwindled. Quiet whispers spread faster than any official announcement. I wasn't the one making noise. I didn't need to be. Everything I had done documenting abuse, preparing legal groundwork, and subtly exposing neglect was beginning to manifest naturally. The world was taking notice of the people my parents had refused to help me. One evening, my father stormed into my apartment. His face was red, his hands shaking. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" he spat. I shook my head, calm, collected. "No, I'm observing it." "You've humiliated us in front of everyone," he shouted. "Not I," I corrected him. "The truth did. I just let it breathe." My mother arrived shortly after, flustered, panicked. "Ethan, we can fix this. We'll make it right." I tilted my head. "Right? How do you make up for decades of neglect? For the night I nearly died and you refused to help me?" Their silence was deafening. For the first time, I saw them as I had always known. They were people who relied on appearances to hide emptiness. Their carefully curated life, their wealth, their influence, all meaningless against the truth. And slowly, I realized something profound. The greatest power wasn't in revenge. It was in control without aggression. Over the following weeks, I implemented subtle changes. I quietly restructured accounts connected to the trust my brother and I had prepared. I funneled support toward causes my parents had ignored, highlighting their hypocrisy without announcing it publicly. Every time they tried to reassert control over social circles or business decisions, I had already anticipated their moves. No one saw it happen. No one heard my voice in boardrooms or charity offices, but the outcome spoke louder than words. Their influence diminished, their reputation quietly tarnished, and their authority evaporated piece by piece. Then came the personal reckoning. My parents attempted to confront me privately. They begged, they rationalized, they tried to appeal to blood. I looked at them with the calm intensity I had honed over years of betrayal. "I am not the child you think you own. I am the man who survived because someone else believed in me." My brother had witnessed the entire confrontation. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence was enough. "You'll regret this," my father whispered, voice low and venomous. I let the words hang. I already do regret being patient for so long. Finally, the moment of quiet triumph arrived. My parents, stripped of the power they had wielded so carelessly, could only watch as the world adjusted to reality. Friends distanced themselves. Boards questioned their decisions. Sponsors withdrew. The veneer they had polished for decades crumbled under the weight of truth. And I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I simply walked forward, clean-shaven, composed, and fully aware of my own strength. The surgery had healed my body. My brother had preserved my life. And now, with their absence of support exposed for all to see, I had reclaimed my autonomy entirely. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet, measured, invisible until the consequences are undeniable. As I stood on the balcony that evening, looking out over the city lights, I felt a profound calm. The people who tried to abandon me had suffered not because I sought vengeance, but because truth has a way of catching up. And in that calm, I finally understood. Real family, loyalty, and strength weren't things you were given. They were things you earned, nurtured, and protected. I had them now. Months passed. The echoes of that family gathering and the subtle fallout had faded into silence. But the impact remained. My parents no longer controlled social circles, charity boards, or even the narrative of my life. Their authority had quietly evaporated, leaving them powerless. I, on the other hand, was free. I had rebuilt my life slowly, carefully. My brother remained by my side, a constant reminder of loyalty and courage. We established small ventures together, not flashy, not for recognition, but meaningful. Scholarships, aid for the neglected, quiet support for people who, like me, had been ignored by those who were supposed to love them. One day, I received a call from a distant cousin. "I just wanted to tell you," People are noticing, she said softly. Your parents aren't the same. And you've built something real. I smiled faintly. I didn't build it to be noticed. I built it to survive and to honor the people who truly cared. My parents tried one last time to reach out. A formal letter, carefully worded, asking for reconciliation. But I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty, not out of anger, but because I had learned the most important lesson. Some people cannot understand the value of loyalty or sacrifice, no matter how much you explain it. I spent that evening alone on my balcony, looking at the city lights. For the first time in my life, I felt completely untethered from the expectations, the neglect, and the manipulation that had defined my childhood. I wasn't seeking revenge anymore. I wasn't seeking validation. I was simply alive, and for the first time, entirely in control. Later, my brother joined me, handing over a cup of coffee. We sat in silence, comfortable and quiet. You've come a long way, he said. We've come a long way, I corrected. He nodded. The unspoken bond between us needed no further words. He had saved me when no one else would, and together, we had reclaimed the parts of life they tried to steal. Sometimes, people believe that power comes from control, wealth, or bloodlines. But the true measure of strength, I realized, is in resilience, loyalty, and quiet courage. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself. The kind that survives every storm and emerges intact. Years later, I would look back on that hospital room. On the envelope of cash my brother had risked everything to provide. That moment had been the turning point, not just for survival, but for reclaiming my life. I would never forget it, and I would never forget the lesson it taught me. Family isn't always who you're born to. Family is who shows up when it matters most. The surgery had healed my body. My brother had healed my soul, and the reckoning with my parents had healed my mind. I was Ethan Miller, clean-shaven, whole, and finally free. The life they couldn't control was mine, and I intended to live it fully.